Please take your seats. Good afternoon to all of you, and good afternoon to all those who have joined us online. So, friends, the purpose of this class is to see the Civil Services main GS paper 4 question paper. So, the whole idea of today's session is to understand two things. First is how prepared are we with respect to this question paper, and secondly, if we were to write this year's mains, how would we tackle this question paper? And those who have appeared for the mains, you can also check for yourselves that what you have done and what needs to be done and how much is the gap or the lack of gap in that. Okay. So before I come to the specifics of the question paper, I would like to give you some broad guidelines regarding the session that we are about to conduct now. First is that today we are only going to take up the theory questions, because if I try to handle the entire paper today, I'll not be able to do justice to each and every question specifically. So today in this class, we are only going to take a look at the theory questions. The case study questions, we are going to take a look at some other subsequent class, most probably in the next class. Okay. So today is the day of discussion around the theory questions. Now, how would we go along in these discussions? First, we will try to understand that from where the question has been picked, from which section of the syllabus. And then I'll tell you that what kind of tools you require to handle that question, and then what kind of content is desired under that question. What can be a probable answer for that question? You know, ethics is one such subject where we cannot have one answer for a particular question. There could be different kinds of answers for the same question. The whole point of argument here is that I'll give you one type of model answers, but that is not the only type. There can be other types of model answers as well. You have to write nothing. You have to just focus on the discussion and what I am saying in the class. And at the end, I'll share a PDF with all of you where you will find the relevant model hints and the relevant content related to a particular question. Okay. Deliberately, I have not created any model answer for question number 3, which is the quotation based question. Okay, because I wanted to discuss it at length in the class with your participation. So we will pick one question at a time and I'll try to cover that question exhaustively. Once I am done with the question, I will give you the opportunity to ask your questions, okay, around that question. So if you have any questions, you can just jot them down as I am discussing, and after I finish the discussion of the question, then you can ask the question, because if I start entertaining questions at every now and then, I'll not be able to finish the discussion, because you know that we have a severe limitation of times at our hand. Okay, so let's take a look at the question paper first. Now, the official question paper has not been released, and therefore I have just jotted down the questions. So take a look at this. The first question, if we see, what do you understand by moral integrity and professional efficiency in the context of corporate governance in India? Illustrate with suitable examples. Now, this question directly flows from corporate governance. You tell me that, do you feel a degree of comfort when you handle this question? Because this topic we have covered in the class extensively. So now everything rests on your writing ability. The content is not such a big problematic thing here. Question number 1B. International aid is an accepted form of helping resource challenged nations. Comment on ethics in contemporary international aid. Support your answer with suitable examples. Again, a question that is flowing from administrative ethics or ethics in public administration, US units. Okay. And the topic is actually ethics in international relations. So it is international administration related ethics. In this year's paper, you will find that the 6th unit and the 5th unit has dominated. Can you see a direct question from or related to the teachings of Guru Nanak Dev Ji? I've said this umpteen number of times in the class that be prepared for such kind of questions. Now, if we take a look at question number 2, A part, corruption is the manifestation of failure of core values in the society. In your opinion, what measures can be adopted to uplift the core values in the society? It is actually an amalgamation of the last topic of the last unit, which is issues related to corruption and human values, foundational values, or basic service values. Do you understand that? So it's a kind of a marriage between the two. Question number 2B, in the context of work environment, differentiate between coercion and undue influence with suitable examples. This is a question drawn from work culture. Okay. Now, remember, work culture was nothing but the work ambience or the work environment, which on one hand increases satisfaction and on the other hand contributes to productivity of an organization. So I've discussed this also in the class at length. Now, question number 3 talks about quotations, and it asks, what do each of these quotations convey to you in the present context? The first quotation is by Mahatma Gandhi, the second one by Jawaharlal Nehru, and the third one by Swami Vivekananda. I told you in the class that Gandhi and Vivekananda, they are favorite of UPSC. So you see that points stand vindicated. The simplest acts of kindness are by far more powerful than 1,000 heads bowing in prayer, said by Gandhi. Now, if we look at the second quotation, to awaken the people, it is the woman who must be awakened. Once she is on the move, the family moves, the village moves, the nation moves, by Jawaharlal Nehru. And the third one, do not hate anybody, because that hatred that comes out from you must, in the long run, come back to you. If you love, that love will come back to you, completing the circle, by Swami Vivekananda. If you look deeply into this quotation, it is nothing but a translation of a basic tenet of Advaita Vedanta, of which Swami Vivekananda is a proponent. So again, all these 3 questions, as I told you, that there will be one question which will have 3 quotations, and we did that in our class tests also. You see, I told you that that will come from the 5th unit, and therefore the 5th unit becomes so crucial. 40 marks out of 130 marks are directly from the 5th unit, contribution of thinkers and philosophers from world and India. And you saw some things like moral intuition, moral reasoning, and you cannot handle those things unless you understand meta-ethics properly. So let's take a look at question number 4, part A. What really matters for success, character, happiness, and lifelong achievements is a definite set of emotional skills, your EQ, not just purely cognitive abilities that are measured by conventional IQ tests. Do you agree with this view? Give reasons in support of your answer. Again, a statement which was made by Daniel Goleman. Remember, in his famous book, Why Emotional Intelligence Matters More Than IQ. So this is again a straightforward question from emotional intelligence. I told you that emotional intelligence से एक ही question आने वाला है, और देखो वही हुआ, एक ही question आया है. Part B is differentiate moral intuition from moral reasoning with suitable examples. It is a question from meta ethics. Now this is something which is novel in this year's paper. Prior to the present year, meta-ethical topics have been asked, but they have been integrated with normative ethics or applied ethics. But this year there is a direct question from meta-ethics, and you must be good with both these ideas, moral intuition and moral reasoning, in order to handle this question. Straightforward question again from our classes. Question number 5A, is conscience a more reliable guide when compared to laws, rules, and regulations in the context of ethical decision making? Discuss. Now, this is from laws, rules, regulations, and conscience as a guide for ethical decision making. You see that more or less the language that has been used in this question, I use more or less the same kind of language when I gave you a practice question, if you remember. Okay, so this again flows directly from our class notes. Let's take a look at question number 5B. Probity is essential for an effective system of governance and socio-economic development. Discuss. Again, probity in governance, a straightforward question. One more time. Question number 6. What were the major teachings of Guru Nanak? Explain their relevance in the contemporary world. This is again from philosophers and moral thinkers. Indian philosophy, I told you, that is the hot cake now as far as GS paper 4 is concerned. So you must be very good with Indian philosophy. काफी questions आ रहे हैं वहां से. And the last question is, explain the term social capital. How does it enhance good governance? While we were discussing good governance, I told you about social capital and how social capital helps in improving good governance. So if you take a look carefully at this question paper, at least the theoretical part, and that is also true with the case study part, but because we are restricting our discussions only for now only to the theoretical section, you'd see that all these questions are not alien to us. We have covered all of them in the classes. Now, honest to yourself and subject to your revision, you tell me that can you handle the theoretical portion on the basis of the classes that we have done. How many of you are comfortable with the paper? Raise your hands. That you're comfortable with the paper. Okay, very good. And you know that with practice you can always improve. Okay, तो चलो पहले क्वेश्चन से हम शुरू करते हैं, that how we should approach this paper. First question, what do you understand by moral integrity and professional efficiency in the context of corporate governance in India? Illustrate with suitable examples. Now, this question is really straightforward. It cannot get more easier than this one. सीधा पूछा जा रहा है इसमें क्या कि moral integrity क्या है और professional efficiency क्या है in the context of corporate governance in India, and provide some examples to support your arguments. So how should you approach this question? In the introduction, first you must define what is corporate governance. Then you must define what is moral integrity and what is professional efficiency, and highlight in the introduction itself that moral integrity and professional efficiency are two aspects of corporate governance. I'll talk about detail in that, but just I'm telling you the structure first. First, in the introduction, you have to focus on definition, because whenever these kind of concepts are integrated in a particular question, it is always advisable that right at the outset you define the concepts for the clarity of the evaluator and for giving this message to the evaluator that you understand these concepts and you are not writing something vague around them. Okay, so in the introduction you must do that itself. Then you must talk about the aspects of moral integrity and the aspects of professional efficiency in the body. In the conclusion, you must give some examples from the Indian corporate world. Like, so for example, the Tata Group, they are known for their moral integrity. So you can give example of any particular corporate house which has showcased integrity, or you can highlight the example of a particular corporate incident where there was lack of moral integrity or there was lack of professional efficiency. Ideal scenario would be one example which vindicates this point and another example which shows that when these things were lacking, how the overall governance suffered. ठीक है, so straightforward question था. अगर मैं आपको बोलूँ कि इसको लिखना कैसे है, so this is how we should write it. See, in the introduction, first you have to define corporate governance. And corporate governance broadly refers to a set of systems, processes, and principles according to which corporations are controlled, directed, and governed in the best interest of all stakeholders. Exactly the line that we have written in our notes when we were covering this topic. Moral integrity is the practice of showing consistent and uncompromising adherence to rules, principles, and values. It means doing the right thing when even nobody is watching. This is again nothing but definition of integrity. Moral तो एक adjective लगा दिया गया है उसके सामने. Integrity is always moral. Do you understand that? So it is qualifying what integrity is. And professional efficiency is the ability of professionals to use the available resources. It means time resource, money resource, other utilities in an optimum fashion to achieve the desired goals. Moral integrity and professional efficiency are two critical aspects of corporate governance. So this is how your answer starts. इंट्रोडक्शन में आप क्या करते हो, ये लिखने की जरूरत नहीं है. इंट्रोडक्शन बॉडी आई हैव रिटन हियर जस्ट फॉर द सेक ऑफ योर अंडरस्टैंडिंग. आपने सबसे पहले कॉर्पोरेट गवर्नेंस क्या है उसको डिफाइन कर दिया, आपने मॉरल इंटीग्रिटी क्या है उसको डिफाइन कर दिया, और प्रोफेशनल एफिशिएंसी क्या है उसको डिफाइन कर दिया. कॉर्पोरेट गवर्नेंस इज the set of structure, systems, and processes which ensures that corporations are run in the best interest of all the stakeholders. Moral integrity is sticking to a set of values and standards and doing the right thing or the desirable thing even when nobody is watching. And what is professional efficiency? Is when professionals use all the resources, time, money, and other resources in an optimum fashion to realize individual and organizational goals. Now, professional efficiency adds to productivity, and moral integrity builds the image of the company and develops faith of the people in the company. And therefore, both these things become critical aspects of corporate governance, isn't it? So, it is very straightforward. बॉडी में क्या करना चाहिए था आपको? Moral integrity in the context of Indian corporate governance framework primarily focuses on the corporate ethics, which include statutory and legal compliances. Now, integrity is what? Doing the right thing even when nobody is watching. So you are following all the compliances even when you are not getting a notice from the tax authorities. Protection of the rights of all shareholders, customers, and employees. It means all stakeholders. Responsibility and accountability of the board of directors and management of the company. Timely reporting and adequate disclosures to maintain transparency in operations and corporate social responsibility. All these things highlight what? That the organization has integrity. What kind of integrity? Moral integrity. Integrity, professional integrity भी हो सकती है, ठीक है? Now, professional efficiency in the context of India is closely related to three dynamically interlacing components of professional performance: competency, standards, and practice. Now, what is competency? Competency simply refers to the skill set that you have in order to perform a task efficiently. Standard means that in the corporate world, we have agreed to some expected levels of working structure, or you can say we have all agreed to some expected outcomes or some expected procedures or expected methods. All of us, we have agreed on that, and if we do not meet those standards, we say that the efficiency is lacking in the organization. And practice is the best practices that we follow in any organization. तो हमको standard भी maintain करना है, हमको competent भी रहना है, और हमको best practices भी follow करना है. तभी जाके हम प्रोफेशनल एफिशिएंसी ला पाएंगे किसी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में. सो टेक अ लुक एट दिस. Just take a look at this Venn diagram, and shows competency, which includes skills, knowledge, attributes, and behaviors that enables an individual to perform a task or an activity successfully within a given job. Practice means applying knowledge and expertise to define sets of standards. And what is standards? Agreed ways of doing things. That is standards. So if we can maintain these three things: competency, practice, and standards, and here is where the presentation skill comes in your answer writing. If you can make a Venn diagram like this, where you can highlight that how they are relating with each other and fueling professional efficiency in the form of competency, practice, and standards, you add more weightage to your arguments. Efficiency is linked to productivity, and in many organizational settings such as project development, product management, product delivery, and professional services, efficiency and productivity are treated as one and the same. Efficiency and productivity are two sides of the same coin. Efficiency depends not only on resource utilization such as capital, labor, and technology, but also on the swiftness and quality of decision making. तो एक तो रिसोर्स यूटिलाइजेशन हो गया और दूसरा क्या हो गया? डिसीजन मेकिंग. मॉरल इंटीग्रिटी इज मोर रिलेटेड टू बिल्डिंग फेथ in the organization and developing a culture about the organization and building a brand image, whereas the professional efficiency more relates to the survival, sustainability, growth of the organization. Professional efficiency is more related to economic success, whereas moral integrity is more related to ethical success of the organization. ठीक है, यही आपको बताना था. और कंक्लूड कैसे करोगे? आपको कुछ एग्जांपल्स तो देने पड़ेंगे इंडिया के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में. तो यहाँ पे मैंने कुछ एग्जांपल लिया. मॉरल इंटीग्रिटी एंड प्रोफेशनल एफिशिएंसी आर इंट्रिंसिक टू टाटा स्टील, अगर आप उनका पेपर पढ़ोगे इस बार का, एंड हैज बीन अ पार्ट ऑफ इट्स लेगेसी सिंस इट्स इंसेप्शन एज एनविजन्ड बाय इट्स फाउंडर जमशेदजी टाटा. On the other hand, Satyam scam, which was methodically planned effort to defraud stakeholders committed in 2009 by Ramalinga Raju, who was the chairman and founder of Satyam Computers, by the way. क्या गलतियां की थी उन्होंने? Exaggerating sales, earnings, cash balances, personnel numbers. In fact, some money was siphoned off from company funds to his private account. And that was a case of corporate fraud. So how Tata is growing and how Satyam Computers, they have degenerated with the passage of time, is a great example of how moral integrity and professional efficiency in the Indian context have been the key elements for success of any particular organization. अब उसको कुछ conclude भी कर सकते हो आप ऐसे, if we ignore the moral foundation and allow economic systems to operate without moral foundation and without continued education, we will soon create an amoral, if not immoral society and business. Amoral means morality will not be a consideration for the people. Hence, Gandhiji called commerce without morality as a deadly sin. I told you, you have to integrate these ideas that we have covered in the class. So 7 sins of Gandhiji, वहाँ से आप एक sin ये ले सकते हो. So this is how you handle this question. Now you tell me if there is any problem with respect to this question. Can you handle this question now? So it's very easy. क्या करना है आपको? सबसे पहले corporate governance को define करना है, moral integrity को define करना है, फिर प्रोफेशनल एफिशिएंसी को डिफाइन करना है, फिर मॉरल इंटीग्रिटी को इंडियन कॉन्टेक्स्ट में, प्रोफेशनल एफिशिएंसी को इंडियन कॉन्टेक्स्ट में, और फाइनली आपको कुछ एग्जांपल्स दे रहे हैं इंडियन कॉर्पोरेट वर्ल्ड से. ठीक है, आप कुछ भी ले सकते हो. विप्रो का भी एक अच्छा एग्जांपल हो सकता है विद रिस्पेक्ट टू मॉरल इंटीग्रिटी. मॉरल इंटीग्रिटी मतलब जब कंपनी टाइमली अपने सारे कंप्लायंसेस फॉलो करती है, डिस्क्लोजर्स देती है, अपने रिपोर्ट्स इशू करती है, एम्प्लॉई, कस्टमर और शेयर होल्डर सबके इंटरेस्ट को प्रमोट करती है. दैट इज व्हाट इज मॉरल इंटीग्रिटी. एंड प्रोफेशनल एफिशिएंसी इज व्हेन कंपनी यूटिलाइजेस इट्स रिसोर्सेस इफेक्टिवली टू अचीव द डिजायरेबल आउटकम्स. ठीक है, बिल्कुल सीधा सा था. फाइनली इसको एक टच देने के लिए, आपको इंप्रूवमेंट के लिए, आप यू कैन इंटीग्रेट वन वेन डायग्राम और एनी वन सच काइंड ऑफ डायग्राम which improves presentation, and at the end you must also talk about a kind of philosophy. And here Gandhiji's philosophy of commerce without morality can be utilized. In fact, ये question जो बनाई है उसके core में जो philosophy वो Gandhian philosophy ही है. ठीक है? So is this thing clear? It's a straightforward question. Okay. Now, if we look at the question number 2. International aid is an accepted form of helping resource-challenged nations. Comment on ethics in contemporary international aid. Support your answer with suitable examples. अब देखो, what you need to do in this question. First, again, in the introduction, you must highlight what is international aid and what are the different forms of international aid. International aid could not only come in the form of money, but also in the form of technology or any other assistance. International aid, why it is given, you have to highlight that also right at the outset. It is given for development and stability of those nations which are facing a kind of resource crunch or resource challenge or are otherwise underdeveloped. International aid, if you look at the direction of its flow, it always flows from more developed countries to lesser developed countries. Like say for example, America giving or USA giving aid to the LDCs or the least developed countries in the sub-Saharan region. अगर आप देखोगे, so aid is always, the flow of aid is always from the developed to the developing or to the more developing to the less developing. It's always like that. तो ये आपको सबसे पहले इंट्रोडक्शन में हाईलाइट कर देना था. Then in the body you have to talk about what are the challenges with respect to international aid in today's world. Now, one major challenge related to international aid is that it is often given to fulfill the geopolitical objectives of the donor country rather than the idea of promoting welfare of the recipient nation. One good example of that is Chinese aid to several countries like Sri Lanka or Pakistan, say for example. They have ensured that by investing in China, investing in Pakistan and in Sri Lanka, China maintains its geopolitical clout in the region. So the idea is not to take the Sri Lankan vulnerable population or the Pakistani vulnerable population out of poverty, but to fulfill or rather propagate China's political objective in the international arena. Second, एक factor हो सकता है that international aid sometimes it can destroy the sovereignty and autonomy of a particular country. Good example of that is when aid was given to Syria in the aftermath of the Syrian conflict. And this aid which was given to Syria, and there was one program called Cash for Work program in Syria, वहाँ पे आप देखोगे कि जो एड दिया गया था उसमें थोड़ा सा मतलब जो उनके सॉवरेंटी इश्यूज हैं वो चैलेंज हो गए थे, ट्रांसपेरेंसी एंड अकाउंटेबिलिटी वो भी चैलेंज हो गया था. Sometimes you see long term objectives are not attained by giving aid. Say for example Uganda has received aid for several decades now, but it has not developed economically. The whole idea is that international aid can jeopardize the local economy. When you are getting the goods and services for free, why would you work on production unit? That's why international aid quite at times become challenging. Sometimes you see that cultural sensitivities can be destroyed by international aid, and international aid givers, they try to kind of control the decision making, policy making, and administration of the recipient country. One good example of this is when the Ebola virus broke out in West Africa. What happened was a lot of aid flowed from the Western world. And Ebola virus, like the novel coronavirus, was associated with large number of deaths. So how the burials were handled in several countries in West Africa, you have to be careful about two things. First, the cultural sensitivities regarding burial should not be destroyed. And secondly, you must stop the transmission of the virus as well. So you have to be doubly careful when you are trying to give aid of that kind. ठीक है, तो ये सारी challenges, आपको और भी challenges हैं, हम देखेंगे. ये आपको लिखना था mostly body में. कंक्लूजन में आपको क्या करना था? कंक्लूजन में आपको ये करना था कि कुछ इंटरनेशनल एथिकल स्टैंडर्ड्स होने चाहिए, एक्सेप्टेड स्टैंडर्ड्स, और कुछ इंस्टीट्यूशंस होने चाहिए विच एनफोर्स एथिक्स इन द इंटरनेशनल एड गिविंग मैकेनिज्म. ठीक है, सिंपल सा क्वेश्चन है अगेन, एंड आई थिंक most of the students may not have faced much of difficulty when they are writing this answer. हमेशा याद रखना, जब भी कुछ ऐसा लिखा होता है क्वेश्चन में सिंगल इन्वर्टेड कॉमर्स में, it is an indication, a kind of hint to you that please define it, explain it, and thereafter you continue. Okay, तो चलो देखते हैं इसका आंसर कैसा होना चाहिए. Now, take a look at this. Introduction. First, you need to define what is international aid. International aid refers to money, goods, services, or technical assistance that one country provides to another. It can come from governments, international organizations like United Nations, or non-profit organizations like Amnesty International, say for example. The purpose of foreign aid is to improve economies and living conditions in recipient countries while promoting stability and security. So that is what you have to highlight in the introduction. Then in the body, ethical concerns associated with international aid. The objective of the aid, sometimes international aid is advanced to fulfill geopolitical and strategic objectives of the donor nation rather than addressing the social and economic concerns of the recipient nation. For example, the aid given by China to Sri Lanka and Pakistan are part of Chinese geopolitical equations. ये तो पहला ही concern हो गया. Then sovereignty of the recipient nation. International aid should be an enabler rather than an instrument to suppress autonomy and independence. जैसे रेड क्रॉस के ऊपर कुछ क्वेश्चंस हुए थे जब उन्होंने सीरिया में एड दिया था, ह्यूमैनिटेरियन एड. Then third is international aid can create dependency. International aid is not supposed to be a long-term solution. Issues arise when short-term aid becomes long-term dependency. Example है इसका युगांडा. आप वो दे सकते हो. International aid can distort the local market. Obviously, in case of several South Asian countries, that happened to a great part of their history till the time they realized and then they pulled up their economies. When huge amount of aid for free flow to the affected people, it means no longer there is any use of local businesses for their needs. Issue of transparency and corruption. Aid funds and materials are lost to corruption through theft, appropriation, deliberate management, and nepotism. And the aid which came from United States of America after 2001 to Pakistan, that aid is always challenged on this ground, that the military generals, they misappropriated huge amount of funds, and they have purchased or they have invested in assets abroad, and that has not translated really into development in Pakistan. So corrupt governments and local officials are well known to get rich in many places through misusing foreign aid. For example, American aid given to Pakistan has been always under the scanner due to issues of transparency and corruption. International aid can facilitate dictatorial regimes. Huge quantities of financial, material, and military aid are given to dictatorial regimes around the world by Western donors. Like, say, for example, the Western countries, in order to fulfill their geopolitical equations in the Middle East, they have suppressed democracy. In the name of promoting democracy, they fight everywhere else in the world, but there they have been the greatest anti-democrats because they were fulfilling their political or geopolitical ambitions. International aid can undermine culture of the recipient nation. Aid that accommodates local customs, traditions and values are more likely to be effective in the long term. सबसे बेस्ट एग्जांपल मैंने आपको बताया इबोला वायरस से रिलेटेड जो एड मिला था वेस्टर्न अफ्रीकन कंट्रीज को, तो वो जो बरियल प्रैक्टिसेस होते थे वहां पे दोनों चीजें आपको ध्यान में रखनी है कि सेंसिटिविटी भी आप रखो और ट्रांसमिशन भी ना होने दो. ठीक है, कंक्लूड कैसे करोगे? द रियल पर्पस ऑफ इंटरनेशनल असिस्टेंस इन द फॉर्म ऑफ एड शुड बी to promote long-term prosperity and the establishment or strengthening of political institutions of the recipient nation. Nations use foreign aid to tackle a variety of global issues such as disease, terrorism, and climate-related issues. And you can also highlight here that how we need to follow the United Nations preamble or the preamble which defines how international relations should be. Or you can also highlight Article 51 of the Indian Constitution and how international relations should be encouraged in the light of that article. ठीक है, ऐसे करके आप इसको क्लोज कर सकते थे. Again, a simple straightforward question. It will not take much of an effort to write this one as well. Let's move to question number 2. Yes. No, we cannot say that because they do it for their geopolitical aspirations. In no way British aid distorts India's sovereignty. We cannot say so. Yes, in dictatorial regimes, when aid is advanced, the whole idea is to fulfill some objective in that area. Okay. Now, this has happened throughout northern Africa. और आप देखोगे कि there is also a kind of allegation that China gives some money to North Korea. Yes, yes, you can say that as well. Sometimes you see that geopolitical tensions are manufactured in order to push local economy of the donor nation. Like, say, for example, the weapons industry of the US, it flourishes when there is a tussle and problems all across the world. Yes, you can. You can. Yes. Yes. In the environmental context also, if you see, aid is given mostly in the form of money, but not technology transfer does not occur. So unless there is proper technology transfer, we'll not be able to fight climate change. तो आप ये भी बोल सकते थे, ठीक है? Okay, let's take a look at question number 2A part. Corruption is the manifestation of the failure of core values in the society. In your opinion, what measures can be adopted to uplift the core values in the society? So again, a straightforward question. करप्शन आपको डिफाइन करना था पहले, वो क्या है, करप्शन के टाइप क्या है, फॉर्म क्या है. रिमेंबर, एम्बेजलमेंट, फ्रॉड, ब्राइबरी, ये सब कुछ आपको इंट्रोडक्शन में ही ब्रीफली हाईलाइट कर देना था. ये भी बताना था कि करप्शन कोअर्सिव हो सकता है और collusive भी हो सकता है, और इंट्रोडक्शन में ही आपको लिख देना था that the degenerescence of values in the society is a major reason for the existence of corruption. ठीक है, अब वो कौन से वैल्यूज हैं जिनकी हम बात कर रहे हैं? इंटीग्रिटी या टॉलरेंस या तरह तरह के जो भी सोशल वैल्यूज हैं, वी कैन टॉक अबाउट दैट, and then how we can promote these values in the society to build a fair and just society one more time, what challenges we will face in doing so, and the way forward. That is how the answer should be ending. So again, बहुत simple सा question था ये भी. देखो, corruption is the manifestation of failure of core values in the society. In your opinion, what measures can be adopted to uplift the core values in the society? First, introduction में आप corruption को define करो. Corruption is an abuse of public resources or position in public life for private gain. That is corruption. The scope for corruption increases when the system is fragile, laws are weak, justice system is sluggish, and the division of power between political, executive, and bureaucracy is ambiguous. Exactly the sentence that we have written in our notes. ठीक है. Embezzlement, nepotism, bribery, favoritism, and fraud are the major forms of corruption. The paradox of India, however, is that in spite of vigilant press and public opinion, the level of corruption is exceptionally high. Corruption could be coercive or collusive in nature. बस इसको इतना ही बताकर यहाँ पर छोड़ दो. You do not have to explain it further because the question is not that. The question is what? The question is corruption is the manifestation of failure of core values in the society. Now, corruption happens not only because of the failure of core values, but because of the failure of system as well. Do you understand that? But the question is specifically highlighting corruption happens due to the failure of core values. So that should be the focal point as you write your answer. So in the body, you can highlight that, however, one of the major reasons for corruption is the degeneration of core values of the society. Values are the fundamental building block of any society or organization. Now, first, आपको ये बताना था कि functions of values क्या होते हैं society में related. Values plays an important role in the integration and fulfillment of man's basic impulses and desires in a stable and consistent manner appropriate for his living. Values help in building societies and integrate social relations. Values help in creating norms to guide day-to-day behavior that is essential to maintain social order. Values influence people's behavior and serve as criteria for evaluating the actions of others, and values shape the attitudes of a person or institution. तो ये आपने इसको highlight कर दिया कि values क्यों जरूरी है society के लिए. The decline in the core values like integrity, responsibility, humanity, compassion, harmony, civic duties, fairness, fraternity, and respect for others is an area of major concern that is tormenting societies. It means destroying societies. Such value degenerescence promotes corruption in social structures and institutions. यहाँ से आपने पूरे चीजों को लिंक कर दिया जो भी आप पहले ऊपर लिख रहे थे. In order to restore the core values, we need an integrated approach and contributions at all levels. और याद है आपको role of family, society, educational, बस वो एक दिया हुआ है, आपको और भी लिखने हैं उसके साथ. Family and educational institutions must promote value-based learning and conduct. This will help in the creation of aware and responsible citizens. First important requirement for a good society. Second, government should address the value gap by making value-based policies and laws. Laws should encourage values in the society. Institutions should function in an impartial, transparent, and accountable manner to build public trust. Like say, for example, once the Supreme Court said that CBI functions like a caged parrot, so that is a kind of attack on the aspirations of the society. Okay. Third, the media should play its role, responsibility, and through its discussions and programs try to build values like fraternity. At the same time, media should discourage prejudice and stereotypes. Religious and social institutions must take leadership role and encourage values like compassion, tolerance, and humanity. The political leadership must maintain highest standards of integrity and probity in public life, because the politicians, they are at the top of the tree, and their behavior has a demonstration effect on all others in the society. Others learn by looking at the politicians. Do you understand that? So whichever way they go, the whole society also moves because they are in the driver's seat. And finally, how would you conclude this? You would conclude this by saying that corruption today poses a danger not only to the quality of governance, but it is threatening the very foundations of our society and the state. If we fail to build a value-based society, then it will impact our social well-being and abridge our basic freedoms. We'll not be able to even protect our fundamental rights in the long run if the values keep on going down in the society. तो होल आइडिया आपको यही था, यहाँ पर फोकस यही था वैल्यू पे, वैल्यू है क्या और वैल्यू को हम कैसे प्रमोट करें. और आज कौन से वैल्यूज कम हो गए हैं. मोस्ट ऑफ द पीपल who are not prepared well with respect to GS paper 4, they will pick some values and they will start talking about those values, but that is only a small aspect of the question, not the entire question. ठीक है, क्लियर हुआ ये, सिंपल था ये भी. चलो अगले पे जाते हैं. Now, question number 2, B part. In the context of work environment, differentiate between coercion and undue influence with suitable examples. इसके इंट्रोडक्शन में सबसे पहले आपको वर्क एनवायरनमेंट और वर्क प्लेस एनवायरनमेंट के बारे में लिखना था. वर्क प्लेस एनवायरनमेंट क्या होता है? इट रेफर्स टू द स्ट्रक्चर, द सिस्टम्स एंड द रिलेशंस विद इन विच एन इंडिविजुअल परफॉर्म्स हिज टास्क. दैट इज वर्क प्लेस एनवायरनमेंट or the work environment. In simple words, it refers to the ambience of the workplace. That is the workplace environment. Now, in the workplace environment, you know that if we have things like coercion and undue influence, then it will distort not only the productivity of the organization, but it will lower the morale of the employees. Work environment, broadly speaking, दो तरीके के हो सकते हैं. Facilitating and debilitating. Facilitating work environment is one in which your potential is at your highest. Do you understand that? Or you reach your potential. That is a facilitating work environment. A debilitating work environment is one which suppresses your initiative, which always criticizes you unnecessarily, which lowers your morale, where there is nepotism, favoritism, all these kind of things. It means every day is a day full of pain in that kind of a scenario. तो आपको ये बताना सबसे पहले इंट्रोडक्शन में कि वर्क एनवायरनमेंट होता क्या है, टाइप्स ऑफ वर्क एनवायरनमेंट क्या होते हैं. आप इसको पॉजिटिव और नेगेटिव वर्क एनवायरनमेंट भी बोल सकते हो, बट मोर टेक्निकली इट वुड बी फैसिलिटेटिंग एंड डेबिलिटेटिंग work environment. And then you have to define what is coercion and what is undue influence. Coercion is the use of force. It could be physical force, it could be mental force, psychological force, financial force, any kind of force to pressurize someone to do something which he or she is unwilling to do. And similarly, undue influence refers to that when by utilizing any particular advantage that you have in the organization, you influence the decision making of others, or you take away from them their rational thinking and their freedom of choice. Got it? That is undue influence. तो ये दोनों चीजें आपको बतानी थी और फाइनली आपको कंक्लूड करना था कि एक अच्छे वर्क एनवायरनमेंट में ये चीजें नहीं होनी चाहिए. So let's take a look at that now. In the context of work environment, differentiate between coercion and undue influence with suitable examples. Straightforward question, छोटा सा क्वेश्चन है. इंट्रोडक्शन में आपको वर्क एनवायरनमेंट को डिफाइन करना था पहले. वर्क एनवायरनमेंट refers to the physical space, institutional settings and professional relations within which an individual performs his or her tasks. Work environments could be either facilitating, that encourages initiative, fosters respect, promotes productivity and ensures dignity, or debilitating, आप इसको पॉजिटिव और नेगेटिव भी बोल सकते हैं, that creates unnecessary stress, burnouts and low morale which can impact individual and organizational performance. In today's day and world, you know that one major factor of success is the quality of work environment in corporate spaces or in administrative spaces. A negative work environment not only tolerates coercion and undue influence but also promotes them to the extent of common detriment. ठीक है, तो अब होता क्या है coercion और undue influence, इसको define कर दो body में पहले. Coercion is the use of force to pressurize someone to do something that they are unwilling to do. Coercion exploits the vulnerability of a particular person. Examples of coercion may include physical force or violence, blackmail, extortion, psychological pressure, or the abuse of authority or power. Undue influence occurs when an individual is able to use an advantage to coerce another party's decisions. So decisional autonomy is destroyed when there is undue influence. Sometimes it is also known as influence peddling. जैसे कि आपने सिफारिश कर दी किसी की, या आपने कोई डिसीजन को ओवरटर्न कर दिया अपने एडवांटेजियस पोजीशन की वजह से. ठीक है, Coercion is defined under Section 15 of Indian Contract Act 1872. Coercion involves telling employees what to do and promises punishment if employees do not follow directives. Undue influence is defined under Section 16 of the Indian Contract Act 1872. It refers to the influence by which a person is induced to act otherwise than by their own free will or without adequate attention to the consequences. Now here you can bring in St. Thomas Aquinas and you can talk about the three elements of human action, and one important element of that was free will, and how undue influence distorts free will or freedom of the decision maker. The coercive leadership method, also known as autocratic leadership, is a managerial approach that involves supervisors providing explicit instruction and close supervision. It is a strict leadership style that leaves little room for error and demand results. Okay? And how would you conclude it? You would conclude it by highlighting, in order to build a healthy work environment, these are the things that we require. Employees must be cordial to each other. Equal treatment must be given to all employees. Top performers should be appreciated and laggards should be encouraged. Organizations must have friendly policies and practical guidelines. Transparency should be maintained and accountability should be enforced. Leaders should lead by example and keep the communication channels open for all. Okay, so there is free flow of information, no miscommunication, no communication gap as well. And then apart from the above, internal processes and institutions like internal complaints committee should be strengthened to identify and punish misconduct. Okay, so work culture is something that is not built in a day, but it is always based on values. Like the Tata, say for example, if you go to Tata, you will see that a vibrant work culture exists in that organization. Okay? So straightforward question tha again. So all the 4 questions that we have discussed so far, you will see that we can handle them with our notes, and obviously you have to have some writing ability. अब जाते हैं इन क्वेश्चंस पे जो गेम चेंजर हैं इस पूरे पेपर के. इन क्वेश्चंस को लोग अच्छे से जिन्होंने हैंडल किया होगा उनके मार्क्स ही आएंगे 130 प्लस 140 प्लस, वहां पे जाएंगे. The simplest acts of kindness are by far more powerful than 1,000 heads bowing in prayer. Mahatma Gandhi. So the question is very straightforward. It says that kindness is more important than prayers. Do you get that? Simple question. Now, how would you approach this? Sometimes what people do is, in such kind of questions, they only talk about Gandhi. And if the quote is by Nehru, they only talk about Nehru or Swami Vivekananda, they only talk about Swami Vivekananda. You have to understand the real import of the quotation, and then you have to apply it under different kind of situations or scenarios. यहाँ पे आप शुरू कैसे कर सकते हो इसको? आप शुरू कर सकते हो गांधी जी के ही लाइफ के एक इंसिडेंट से. हुआ ऐसा था that Gandhi ji was on a train, and while he was boarding the train, he lost a shoe. And as he lost a shoe, he took the other one off and he threw it out of the window. The whole idea was that if somebody gets hold of that one shoe, gets the other one as well, so has a pair to wear. So you get that? So this is an act of kindness with Gandhi ji showed at that moment. अब इसको बहुत जगह अब relate किया जा सकता है. We need to be kind and compassionate when we are trying to understand the problems of the weak and vulnerable sections of the society. You can take it to that level. During times of natural disasters, when we are talking to, say, the rape survivors, or we are talking to people who are displaced due to war, due to environmental degradation, in all such actions, we have to showcase kindness. Do you get it? और इस तरीके से ही हम लोगों के लिए एक अच्छी दुनिया बना सकते हैं. So kindness is the basic human value that you have to highlight, and kindness and compassion are like 2 wheels of the same chariot. If you do not have kindness, you will not have compassion. अगर आप में दया नहीं है तो आप में करुणा भी नहीं होगी. बस यही चीज आपको आगे कन्वे करना है. और आप इसको कई कॉन्टेक्स्ट में लिख सकते हो, सोशल कॉन्टेक्स्ट में लिख सकते हो, आप जो चाइल्ड लेबर है उसके कॉन्टेक्स्ट में लिख सकते हो, पॉवर्टी के कॉन्सेप्ट में लिख सकते हो, इलिटरेसी के कॉन्सेप्ट में लिख सकते हो, एंड यू कैन देन इंटीग्रेट अदर स्कॉलर्स, लाइक से फॉर एग्जाम्पल इफ वी showcase kindness that will be in tune with the social contract that we have with each other. The whole idea of having the social contract is to create a better world for each other. So you can use that, and you can also highlight Jean-Jacques Rousseau in this context, that Rousseau said that the contract should always be in the collective interest. Got it? And therefore, if we showcase kindness, we uphold that value of Jean-Jacques Rousseau, that we are building a society on the basis of collective interest and not we are trying to promote our individual interest. तो इसमें ऐसे क्वेश्चंस में ऐसे ही किया जा सकता है कि आप थोड़ा सा एक इंसिडेंट दे दो, उसको कई सारे कॉन्टेक्स्ट में अप्लाई करो, एंड फाइनली कोई भी फिलॉसफी लेकर उसको क्लोज करने की कोशिश करो. जैसे सोशल कॉन्ट्रैक्टेरियनिज्म कुड बी अ गुड फिलॉसफी हियर to close this, because when you are kind, then you build a better world, and the better world is the objective of this social contract. ठीक है, तो आप ऐसे करके इसको क्लोज कर सकते हो. The second quotation, if we see, to awaken the people, it is the women who must be awakened. Once she is on the move, the family moves, the village moves, the nation moves. Jawaharlal Nehru. Now, it is all about the contribution of women and how women can be the enabler in any particular society. How can you start this answer? You can start it with another quotation, like say for example, when you educate a man, you educate an individual, but when you educate the woman, you educate the nation. Yeah, you educate a family. आप कुछ भी ऐसे करके लिख सकते हो. And you can also highlight this, that how women education can help at different levels, like say for example at the local level. You can take help of some examples like the SHGs or the women cooperatives, how they have enabled growth in the local economy. At the regional level, at the national level, at the international level, in different sectors like defense, and ISRO, Chandrayaan is a great example of how the nation is moving because of the contribution of women. So be it Mangalyaan, be it Chandrayaan, you can talk about all those kind of things. See, सारी चीजें निकल कर आती हैं current affairs से ही. And finally, what you have to write while you are trying to close this answer is that what are the challenges still women face with respect to their empowerment. One major challenge is the total female participation in the labor force in India. It is still abysmally low. Then participation of females in the polity of India. When we talk about female or women parliamentarians or those who are in legislative assemblies, you would see that the numbers are abysmally low there as well. When women try to go into entrepreneurship, they face problem with respect to funding, with respect to say team formation, with respect to networking, all those kind of things. So all these things you must highlight, that these are the recent challenges that, or the new challenges that women are facing in the country, and how we can counter them. Okay. Now, if we go to the third one, it says, do not hate anybody, because that hatred that comes from you, you must in the long run come back to you. If you love, that love will come back to you, completing the circle. Swami Vivekananda. Now, here you can highlight what actually is love and what is hatred. Love is a kind of unconditional affection for somebody or something. That is love. And hatred is the antithesis of love. Hatred flows from insecurity. Hatred demands. Love contributes. And love does not flow from any kind of insecurities. Rather, love flows from a kind of blissfulness. So, Swami Vivekananda here says that if you give love, it will come back to you. But if you spread hatred, that will come back to you as well. And in any way, your circle of life would be completed. Integrate the law of karma here. And remember the 12 doctrines of karma जो हमने discuss किया था. what goes around comes around, simply, right? So आप वो कर्म की बात कर सकते हो यहाँ पे, that how the theory of karma says that whatever you do comes back to you in the long run. And then you can take certain examples, like say for example Adolf Hitler. What did he do? He massacred the Jews, and as he massacred the Jews, he imposed severe kind of restrictions on them, and the same thing haunted him later in his life when he was circled or encircled by the Allied forces and was forced to commit suicide. And suicide also flows from a kind of hatred for your self-existence. So the hatred that is spread came back to him. Take the example of, say, Joseph Stalin again, Mao Zedong. You can again talk about these people. Idi Amin, again, he has also committed all kinds of atrocities. You can take such kind of examples from world and you can add more weightage to your argument. How to conclude this? You must conclude this with Swami Vivekananda's or Sri Shankara's Advaita Vedanta. Advaita Vedanta or Aham Brahmaswami, which means that I and you are no different. It means there is no duality in existence, rather non-duality. Brahma and Atma, or Brahman and Atman, they are one and the same. And here you have to use them metaphorically. It means that if you see yourself or your reflection in others as well, then you will not be doing anything which is unjust to them, because you know that in the long run the same thing can haunt you as well. Like say for example, if we start delivering justice on the roads and show lack of faith in our judicial system, then in the long run it might also happen that we commit something which the society considers as an immoral act or an unethical act and punishes us on the road without giving us the opportunity of going through a free trial, which would be again destroying our fundamental rights and be against the principles of natural justice. ठीक है, तो इस तरीके से आपको ये कोट लिखने थे. सिर्फ स्वामी विवेकानंद के बारे में लिख दिया या गांधी के बारे में लिख दिया या नेहरू के बारे में लिख दिया, you are not going to get marks on this. ठीक है, so here we cannot have any kind of model answers. ठीक है, that's why I have not created any model answers for these questions. But what you have to do is you have to break them down and you have to relate them. हमेशा याद रखना कि कोर्ट में जिनका नाम लिखा हुआ है, अगर उनके लाइफ से रिलेटेड आपको कोई स्टोरी पता है, कोई इवेंट पता है, तो उससे शुरुआत कर दो या एंड कर दो जैसे आपको लग रहा है. बट सिर्फ उसी के बारे में बात मत करते रहो, उनकी लाइफ हिस्ट्री के बारे में मत बात करते रहो. Some people may also write that Gandhiji launched several mass movements against the British, and one of the major movements was civil disobedience movement, but that is one movement which created a lot of criticism for Gandhiji related to the Gandhi-Irwin Pact. Now this is baseless. आपको ये करने की जरूरत ही नहीं है. This is not GS paper 1, this is GS paper 4, and therefore you have to always talk around the ethical dimensions of the quotation rather than the political or the historical dimension of the quotation. ठीक है, easy था. हाँ बोलो. Yes, you can use whatever you want. The whole idea is कि जो जिस फिलॉसफी को फॉलो करते हैं, जैसे अगर आप गांधी जी के बारे में लिख रहे हो तो गांधीयन फिलॉसफी और ट्रस्टीशिप जो उनका प्रिंसिपल है ट्रस्टीशिप का, वो कर सकते हो. कंस्ट्रक्टिव वर्क जो था उनका, वो कर सकते हो. इफ यू आर राइटिंग अबाउट नेहरू, देन यू कैन हाईलाइट सोशल डेमोक्रेट, that he espoused now what this socialism, some principles of socialism, and it talks about equity, equality, and labor participation, women empowerment, all those kind of things. And here, if you're writing on Swami Vivekananda, you highlight about the Advaita Vedanta, because Advaita Vedanta, the highest philosophical interpolation of the Vedic philosophy. ठीक है, तो आपको वो करना था कुल मिलाकर. ठीक है, होल आइडिया ये है कि बस एक ही स्कॉलर पे नहीं रहना है, बहुत सारे स्कॉलर्स के बारे में आपको बात करनी है. ठीक है. Now let's move to question number 4. What really matters for success, character, happiness, and lifelong achievements is a definite set of emotional skills, your EQ, not just purely cognitive abilities that are measured by conventional IQ tests. Do you agree with this view? Give reasons in support of your answer? This is again a question which is flowing from 4th unit or emotional intelligence. You have to talk about first what is intelligence and how intelligence has been seen by scholars. Intelligence is a complex, and intelligence for several decades was considered only as cognitive abilities. But in the last 20 years, intelligence is now also considered as something which is having an emotional touch to it as well. Emotional intelligence is the ability of self-awareness, social awareness, managing self-emotions, social relations or empathy, and then drawing information from that management using your cognitive mind and then taking decisions. So emotional intelligence is the act of understanding your emotions, emotions in others, managing your emotions, emotions in others, and then drawing information from that management and using that information for decision making. That is emotional intelligence. You have to talk about Peter Salovey and John D. Mayer, who coined the term emotional intelligence, and then you have to talk about Daniel Goleman and his book, how Goleman said that intelligence or IQ could be just a threshold value which gives you entry into an organization. But if you want to grow in the organization, you must exhibit what? Emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is when you try to appreciate the emotional state of mind of the other person. That is emotional intelligence. तो हम देखते हैं इसमें कि क्या लिखा जा सकता था. What really matters for success, character, happiness, and lifelong achievement is a definite set of emotional skills, your EQ, not just purely cognitive abilities that are measured by conventional IQ tests. Do you agree with this view? एक सीधा क्वेश्चन है आपसे, do you agree or do you not? Give reasons in support of your answer. यहाँ पे अगर किसी ने लिखा होगा कि I do not agree, तो वहीं पे खत्म हो गया. आपको लिखना तो यही है कि I agree to this, but in the conclusion, पहले ही मत लिख दो, शुरू से ही ऐसे शुरुआत नहीं करना चाहिए. I agree. On basis of what? You have not given any arguments on the basis of which you agree. So agreement should always be highlighted at the fag end of your answer. याद रखना हमेशा. Human intelligence is marvelously complex. For centuries, researchers and philosophers have attempted to define it. In the modern era, researchers have relied mostly on intelligence quotient, IQ test, to measure intelligence. IQ is your ratio of mental age by chronological age. However, in recent decades, researchers have expanded the definition of intelligence to include a wider set of skills. In the last 20 years, the concept of emotional intelligence, EI, has attained a lot of significance. And this we have written in the class exactly the same line. American psychologists Peter Salovey and John D. Mayer are considered as the fathers of emotional intelligence. According to them, emotional intelligence is the ability to monitor one's own and other people's emotions, label them appropriately, and use the emotional information to guide thinking and behavior. So एकदम exactly आप define कर दो emotional intelligence होता क्या है. Now what is the difference between IQ and EQ? ये आप अपने body में बता दो. IQ usually refers to our intellectual ability. Some of the most common elements of your IQ include our ability to use logic to solve problems, plan and strategize, understand abstract ideas like philosophical ideas, say for example, learn and adapt to change, grasp and use language. Communication skills also flow from your cognition most of the times. Emotional quotient generally refers to our ability to sense emotion in ourselves and in other people. It also refers to how we use that awareness to guide your behavior, our behavior. In general, if you have a high EQ, you may find it easier to identify emotions in yourself and others, empathize with other people, adapt your feelings and behaviors to different situations, control your impulses, withstand temptations and delay gratification, resolve conflicts with others, and communicate effectively. So this is what you have to highlight in the body first, that what is the difference between IQ and EQ. तो आपने EI भी बता दिया, IQ, EQ भी बता दिया, और ये भी बता दिया कि इंटेलिजेंस होती क्या है, ये सारी चीजें. And then you highlight what Goleman said. Goleman believes that IQ is just a threshold quality. It means it matters only for entry to high level management jobs, but once you get there, it no longer helps leaders. According to Goleman, what differentiates effective leaders from ineffective ones is emotional intelligence. People with high EQ demonstrate a high level of self-awareness, empathy and social skills. तो आपने बहुत सारे scholars भी यहाँ पर integrate कर दिए, and conclusion में लिखो, I agree with what Goldman asserts. EQ can be the differentiating factor between ordinary and extraordinary. For example, leaders like Abraham Lincoln and Nelson Mandela had high EQ, which ensured that they create society which is fair and just for all. On the contrary, dictators like Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin lacked EQ and ended up creating dictatorial regimes. Like, say, for example, Abraham Lincoln, he had this option that either you go for the Emancipation Proclamation, which was to be brought by the 13th Amendment to the US Constitution, जिससे क्या होना था, स्लेवरी अबॉलिश हो जानी थी, या यू एंड द सिविल वॉर, दोनों में से कोई एक चूज करो. बट लिंकन चोज बोथ. Got it? And he utilized high degree of EQ. Lincoln said that if we get the 13th Amendment passed, that we will not only free millions of slaves who are in bondage now, but we will also free all those slaves who are in the womb. Do you get that? So he was looking for the future. Similarly, Nelson Mandela, when he was released from prison, he had the option to create an all-black country. But he said that no, South Africa will be a diverse country, rainbow nation. Suna hai kabhi aisa? He said it would be a rainbow nation where everybody will have a space. So they had EQ. Whereas to the contrary, if you see Robert Mugabe, how he created Zimbabwe, he forced on an all-black ownership of all means of production. And that's why that country faced a lot of problems, economic and otherwise. And Adolf Hitler and Stalin, you anyhow know what kind of atrocities they committed. Fourth question dekhte hain hum, B part. What can we write with respect to that? Differentiate between moral intuition from moral reasoning with suitable examples. Now, what is intuition? Intuition is your gut instinct. It is your gut feeling that this is the right thing to do. There is no logic, no rational thinking behind that conclusion. It is just instinctive in nature. That is intuition. What is reasoning? Reasoning is always with the help of logic and rational mind. You will focus on the logic, on the information at hand, and then on the basis of that you will come to a conclusion. देखो, जब आप intuition के basis पे चलते हो, you take decisions quickly. Do you get that? And they mostly flow from the subconscious or unconscious aspect of your mind, intuition. Intuition के base पे जब आप decision लेते हो, you tend to be less flexible because already you are sure on something, right? You have not given a counter thought on that. When it is on moral reasoning, the pace of moral decision making is slightly slow. It is flowing from the cognitive aspect of your mind more, whereas intuition is flowing from the affective aspect of your mind. Sometimes emotions are more involved in intuition, whereas cognition is more involved in reasoning. And when you come up with a moral solution on the basis of application of your mind, you tend to be more flexible because you have raised arguments and counter arguments to create that. अब मॉरल इंट्यूशन के बेस पे अगर आप देखोगे कि कई बार जब आसपास में कोई समझ लो फ्लड आ जाता है या अर्थक्वेक आ जाता है, जैसे नेपाल में अर्थक्वेक आया था या टर्की में अर्थक्वेक आया था, इंडिया रश्ड एड टू दोज कंट्रीज. At that time, India did not ponder over whether it would be right, what are the moral arguments in favor, what are against this aid. India did not think of those kind of things. But when India builds its agricultural program, its poverty alleviation program, there is a lot of thinking. Committees बैठती हैं और बहुत सारे commissions बैठते हैं, reports तैयार होती हैं, discussion होता है parliament में. There is a lot of deliberation when you are applying your reason. But there is a kind of gut instinct or a kind of gut feeling when you are going with intuition. अब दोनों में relation ऐसा पाया गया है कि intuition तब तक आपका strong रहता है जब तक अवेयरनेस लेवल्स थोड़े नीचे रहते हैं. जैसी अवेयरनेस बढ़ती है इशू को लेकर और आप काउंटर आर्ग्यूमेंट्स को भी एंटरटेन करने लगते हो, तो हो सकता है आप मॉरल रीजनिंग के बेसिस पे सॉल्यूशन पे जाओ रादर देन इंट्यूशन के बेसिस पे. ठीक है, तो यही आपको बताना था इसमें कि व्हाट इज द डिफरेंस बिटवीन मॉरल इंट्यूशन एंड मॉरल रीजनिंग. कंक्लूड करते वक्त you can take the help of G.E. Moore, George Edward Moore, who talk about intuition and his open question argument. And you must also highlight David Hume's is-ought gap, where Hume said that whatever is pleasurable is not necessarily good. So you can highlight that you getting an instinct that this is the right thing to do, but that might not always be the right thing to do. That is what you have to keep in mind. तो चलो देख लेते हैं इसका आंसर क्या हो सकता है. इंट्रोडक्शन में आपको सबसे पहले वही लिखना है. डिफरेंशिएट बिटवीन मॉरल इंट्यूशन फ्रॉम मॉरल रीजनिंग विद सुटेबल एग्जांपल्स. मॉरल इंट्यूशंस आर स्ट्रॉन्ग, स्टेबल एंड इमीडिएट मॉरल बिलीफ्स that flow from non-cognitive sources and differ from reasoned moral judgments, which uses moral logic and rational application. Moral intuition is often referred to as gut instinct or gut feeling that helps in discerning chaff from grain. In the moral issues or in moral issues, chaff matlab jo husk hota hai from the grain. Moral reasoning stands in contrast to intuitive moral processes, since it is a conscious, more deliberate process that consists of transforming given information about people in order to reach a moral judgment. And then you must compare moral intuition with moral reasoning. It leads to quick instinctive decisions without lengthy analysis and deliberation. Intuition, whereas reasoning, it involves careful consideration and deep deliberation before coming up with a moral solution. It tends to be less flexible and flows from subconscious aspect of mind. That affective component of mind is the determinant factor in moral intuition. As far as intuition is concerned, it tends to show more flexibility as it is based on rational arguments. The cognitive aspect dominates in moral reasoning. The awareness levels are higher while we base our decisions on moral reasoning. Here V आएगा. For example, India often extends fast-paced and immediate assistance to several countries during times of natural disaster. That is more intuitive. Whereas reason-based ये होगा, the food and wage guarantee programs run by Indian government for nutrition and livelihood security are based on moral logic and reasoning, apart from social logic and social reasoning. Moral intuitions remain strong insofar as they are held with confidence and resist counter evidence, although strong counter evidence can sometimes overrun them. ठीक है, तो एक इफेक्टिव कंपोनेंट पे ज्यादा फोकस करता है, दूसरा कॉग्निटिव कंपोनेंट पे ज्यादा फोकस करता है अपने माइंड के, अगर आप देखोगे तो. While the relationship between moral intuitionism and moral reasoning is argued to be sequential, integrative, and competitive, evidence indicates that moral reasoning system primarily functions as a post hoc rationalization of intuitive driven judgments and behaviors. आपने कुछ कर दिया इंट्यूटिव बेसिस पे या इंट्यूशन के बेसिस पे, अब जब आपको उसको एक्सप्लेन करने बोला जाता है या जस्टिफाई करने बोला जाता है, यू टेक द हेल्प ऑफ रीजनिंग. ठीक है, दैट. सो इट्स नॉट द अदर वे अराउंड. Reasoning does not come before intuition. Mostly intuition comes before reasoning, and reasoning is utilized to justify your intuition. Conclusion में वही करो. G.E. Moore has used intuition to form his open question argument, while David Hume is-ought gap helps us in understanding that at times when we decide what we ought to do on the basis of what exists in the real world, we may end up with lesser moral outcomes. Hence, decision making should be a combination of intuition and reason. ठीक है, लाइक जैसे कि आप उसका हेल्प ले लो, स्टीव जॉब्स का हेल्प ले लो. स्टीव जॉब्स इज ऑल अबाउट रीजनिंग एंड इंट्यूशन. You look that when he is taking any decisions, Jobs, he is having a kind of a feeling that it will work. Do you get it? And there are so many, you can say, so many businessmen of that kind who believe in intuition. And if they believe in intuition, then they try to justify it with the help of their logic, their actions. Yes, 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 you can. So moral reasoning can also be subjective, dear. Not necessarily. Moral reasoning is always objective. Sometimes moral reasoning can overshadow the interpretation of a law. Do you get that? So moral is always subjective in some extent. You cannot say that it is completely objective under all circumstances. In some cases it is objective, like the code of conduct is an objective set. but it is all about meta-ethical discussion where we are talking about cognitivism and non-cognitivist approach to ethics. ठीक है, morality objective है या subjective है, बस यही बताना था आपको. Is this thing clear? Okay, let's move to the next question. The question paper was not at all tough. It was very easy. Question number 5A, is conscience a more reliable guide when compared to laws, rules and regulations in the context of ethical decision making? Discuss. अब यहाँ पे बहुत ज़्यादा आपको laws, rules, regulations ये समझाने की ज़रूरत नहीं थी. Question सीधा पूछ रहा है, conscience ज़्यादा reliable है क्या laws, rules और regulations से? तो आपको ये बताना था कि what is conscience? Conscience is your inner ability to distinguish between right and wrong. It's a kind of aptitude or a skill. Do you understand that? Now, the idea of conscience flows from Christian ethics mostly. So, Saint Paul, Butler, Saint Augustine, I have discussed them in the class, right? How they have talked about conscience as the voice within or the voice of God, which helps you in discerning what is right from what is wrong. But later on, this idea of conscience was also developed by psychologists and neurologists like Sigmund Freud. And Sigmund Freud has highlighted that there is a lot of subjectivity in conscience. Conscience is not always objective. Now, if God has given conscience to everybody, everybody should come to the same conclusion on every moral issue. Then why do we have disagreements on issues like euthanasia, capital punishment, abortion, etc.? So that's why if you go by the religious doctrine, then conscience becomes a reliable guide. But if you go by the non-religious secular doctrine, then you might face problems in upholding conscience all the time, because conscience could be highly subjective. Your conscience is often shaped by your environment, social environment, your values, your family's values, the educational institution that you have attended, and all those kind of things. Do you get it? Therefore, what is the way out? The way out is conscience plus laws, rules and regulation. All should come together to form the moral framework for our actions. From the deontological perspective, there are two sources that guide our moral behavior. One is outside us, which is the laws, rules and regulation, and second is inside us, which is conscience. ठीक है, बस यही बताना था आपको. We have discussed all of that in the class. It's not at all a difficult question. So look here. First, you have to highlight from the deontological perspective, there are two sources that help individuals while making moral decision. One is outside the actor and consists of law, rules and regulation. The second is within the actor and it is the actor's inner conscience. These two sources impose on moral beings an obligation to be ethical, that is, to do good and avoid evil. Combinedly, they provide a theoretical framework for ethical guidance. The word conscience is derived from the Latin word conscientia, meaning privity of knowledge or with knowledge. The English word conscience implies moral awareness. Commonly used metaphors for conscience include the voice within or the inner light. It implies a person's moral sense of right and wrong. This is how you build your introduction. In the body, you highlight in simple words, conscience is an aptitude, intuition or judgment that assists in distinguishing right from wrong. The idea of conscience has developed from early religious views, mostly Christian ethics. Saint Paul believed conscience was a moral guide. Butler, another Christian theologian and philosopher, believed that conscience was God-given ability to reason. Saint Augustine saw conscience as voice of God speaking to us from within. For him, conscience will, in every circumstance, turn us towards the good and away from the evil. The idea of conscience was also later developed by Sigmund Freud, the Austrian neurologist, who suggested that conscience could be explained best by using scientific knowledge instead of using religious views and opinions on the subject. Religious scholars often argue that everybody has the same level of conscience because it is God's gift to mankind. One of the main weaknesses of the religious approach is the idea that not everyone can have the same type of conscience, as young children and people with mental illness will not have the same quality of conscience. And you can here integrate Lawrence Kohlberg stages of moral development कि आप कौन से stage पर हो, उसके basis पे भी आपका conscience determine हो जाएगा. Like say for example, Martin Luther King Jr. approached the question of civil rights on the basis of conscience as proposed by religious views. And in his speech, I Have a Dream, he says, I have a dream one day that God will create a United States of America of that type where my children will not be judged by the color of their skin but by the content of their character. So this is flowing from his beliefs in Christian ethics, Luther King's beliefs in Christian ethics. Hence, from the religious perspective, conscience is a reliable guide to ethical decision making. Question to yahi hai. As it relies on our innate ability to determine what is good and what is bad. However, secularists might not agree with it completely. Secular or non-religious perspectives of conscience support the statement that conscience is not a reliable guide to ethical decision making, as it demonstrates that there is subjectivity within our moral values due to individual experiences and upbringing. They believe that laws, rules, and regulations must supplement conscience to build a fair and equitable society. The conclusion is crisis of conscience. इसके बारे में भी थोड़ी बात कर दो. Where you do not know what is the right thing to do. It's a kind of ethical dilemma. It's a situation in which it is very difficult to decide what is the right thing to do. The term is also used when someone is worrying because they think that they have done something unfair or morally wrong. It is a case of an ethical dilemma, but in a more strong sense, when there is crisis of conscience, the individual fear that his action may be against the voice of conscience and hence ethically wrong. But again, you have to understand this, that ethics also is developed in the society and your conscience is also shaped by the society to some extent and influenced by the society. Your interaction with other actors in the society were critical in the development of your conscience. So there is nothing objective in that fashion. If you go by the divine logic, then there is a lot of objectivity, because while God is giving conscience to everybody, and if the God is almighty, great and good, he will not differentiate. Do you understand that? So then conscience becomes objective, and when something is objective, everybody will come to the same conclusion. And when it is subjective or highly subjective, then it becomes a critical challenge for all. ठीक है, तो यही आपको highlight करना था. Let's move to the next question. Question number 5. Probity is essential. 5b. Probity is essential for an effective system of governance and socio-economic development. Discuss. 150 words, 10 marks. Topic: probity in governance. So आपको इसमें करना क्या था? आपको इसमें सबसे पहले probity define करना था, governance define करना था, और दोनों के बीच का relationship आपको define करना था. ठीक है, कि probity and governance, how they are complementing each other. What is probity, by the way? The word probity means proven integrity and honesty, uprightness. That is probity. Probity is mostly highlighted where? In financial matters. Probity is when you uphold integrity in financial dealings, sometimes more than what the law prescribes. That is probity. Probity builds confidence of the people in the system and develops trust about the organization. Probity also improves the quality of service delivery. Probity promotes other values like accountability, responsibility, transparency, etc. So probity is a critical aspect of good governance. इसके बिना तो good governance हो ही नहीं सकता. वैसे good governance पे एक question और आया हुआ है इस बार, governance छाया रहा as far as the last questions are concerned. Explain the term social capital, how it enhances good governance. But anyhow, let's come to this one first, and this also we have discussed at length in our class. Probity is essential for an effective system of governance and socio-economic development. Discuss. Probity is derived from the Latin word probus, meaning honest. Probity means tried and proven honesty. Probity is integrity, uprightness, and honesty. Probity in governance involves more than simply avoiding corruption. It involves strict adherence to code of ethics and promotion of foundational civil service values, especially in commercial matters and often beyond legal requirement. That is probity. Then in the body, you highlight from the deontological perspective, it is the duty of all civil servants to adopt processes, practices, and behaviors that promote probity in public services. Probity and good governance को relate कर दो फिर उसके बाद. In 1992 report entitled Governance and Development, World Bank set out its definition of good governance. It defined good governance as the manner in which power is exercised in the management of a country's economic and social resources for development. Good governance is when you administer the country and use the resources resources in the interests of the people and to change the life of the people or add quality to their lives. That is good governance. Good governance seeks to promote public interest and general well-being. Probity ensures that the administration sticks to the values of civil services and thus automatically encourages good governance. So if you encourage probity, good governance is automatically encouraged. That is what you can say. There are 4 pillars of good governance. Aap unki baat kar lo. Here I have just given hints. You can elaborate them. Like ethos, which refers to the spirit of the service. It means the essence of governance. Ethics, it means the standards and principles of governance, which is the moral component. Equity is the social component, how you ensure participation and delivery. Efficiency is the economic component, how you run the organization. And then you can also highlight the 8 principles of good governance as given by United Nations consensus oriented, participatory, follows rule of law, effective and efficient, equitable and inclusive, responsive, transparent and accountable. आप ये सारी चीजें बता दो, relate हो गई, दोनों चीजें link हो गई. And then objectives of probity in governance, this is what you have to write before you conclude your answer. To ensure transparency and accountability in, to maintain integrity in public services, to ensure effective resource utilization, to promote inclusive growth and development, to ensure compliance with processes, to preserve public confidence in government, to avoid the potential of misconduct, fraud and corruption, to promote sustainable development, to encourage adherence to laws, rules and regulations. ठीक है? And conclude कैसे करोगे? Probity in governance should be a norm and not an exception. As Marcus Tullius Cicero once said, take from a man his reputation for probity, and the more shrewd and clever he is, the more hated and mistrusted he becomes. Okay? So you can use such kind of quotes to close this answer. In a developing country like India, probity is not a desirable entity but a necessity to build a welfare state. Because if there is mismanagement of funds in a country like India, where we always face challenges with respect to funds, then that would be to our common detriment. ठीक है, तो ये तो चीज़ें देखो ऐसी चीज़ें हैं जिसे कहते हैं ना कि जैसे जैसे टॉपिंग्स की बात करते हैं हम, या एक एडेड चीज़ लेयर जो है, वो वैसी चीज़ें हैं ये. बट मेन कंपोनेंट ये है आंसर का. अगर आपने ये लिख दिया अच्छे से, देन यू विल गेट डेफिनेटली वेरी गुड मार्क्स एज फार एज दिस क्वेश्चन वाज कंसर्न्ड. लेट्स मूव टू द नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन. So we reach to the last question in the theoretical portion, question number 6, A part. What were the major teachings of Guru Nanak? Explain their relevance in the contemporary world. Now see, if you can, if you try to summarize the teachings of Guru Nanak Dev Ji in 150 words, it is really challenging. It is next to impossible because such is the depth of his teachings. But what you can do is you can give a highlight of what he has said. Nanak's teachings could be encapsulated into 3 broad ideas. First is equality, second empowerment, and third kindness. So if you see Guru Nanak Dev Ji, like say for example, he always encouraged female education, female participation in workforce, and he was against those practices which destroyed human dignity, whether in women or in men. He believed that your major enemy is your ego, and the only way to get rid of it is on being on the path of Sat, or when you understand what is really true rather than what is enforced on you by others, that this is true, believe it, rather than what your mind, your heart feels that this is true. That is what is the essence of Guru Nanak Dev Ji's teaching. And आप इनमें बाबा नानक के बारे में इंट्रोडक्शन में थोड़ी चीज़ें लिख सकते हो, 1-2 लाइन, ज़्यादा नहीं. और उसके बाद ये that he is the founder of Sikhism, he is the first of the 10 Sikh gurus, he started the tradition of gurus, and all his ideas, they are encapsulated in the form of hymns in the Shri Guru Granth Sahib Ji. तो आप वो चीज़ें बता सकते हो और कुछ आइडियाज़ को हाईलाइट कर सकते हो, जैसे सत, कीरत और ऐसे कुछ आइडियाज़ हैं जो आप हाईलाइट कर सकते हो अपने आंसर में. तो देखते हैं हाउ कैन वी हैंडल दिस वन. दिस ऑल्सो वी डिस्कस्ड इन द क्लास, राइट? सो विल नॉट बी अ चैलेंज फॉर अस. व्हाट वेर द मेजर टीचिंग्स ऑफ गुरु नानक? एक्सप्लेन द रेलेवेंस इन द कंटेम्पररी वर्ल्ड. इंट्रोडक्शन में आप ये लिख सकते हो, गुरु नानक ऑल्सो रेफर्ड to as Baba Nanak was the founder of Sikhism and is the first of the 10 Sikh gurus. Shri Guru Nanak Dev Ji laid the foundations of Sikhism, born in 1469 in Talwandi, now in Pakistan. Shri Guru Nanak Dev Ji spread the message of Ek Onkar. This means one God who dwells in every one of creation and constitutes the eternal truth. Guru Nanak Dev Ji proposes the following principles to build a society on the principles of ethics, and this we have discussed in the class at length. तो बहुत जल्दी से हम करेंगे. पहले moral standards. It means the major problem with morality is ego or I amness. Guru Nanak in his composition Japji identifies ego as a feeling of individualism. Guru Nanak uses Sat as the principle of spiritual progress. The morally good person, according to this approach, would be one who rises higher and higher away from ego towards the larger self. Human propensities, Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moh, Ahankar, he's talking about them as the 5 thieves or the 5 vices. Human virtues like say wisdom, truthfulness, justice, temperance, courage, humility, contentment and love for humanity. Human duties, he's talking about in Rahitnamas or the code of conduct for the Sikhs, though it is also can be followed by the non-Sikhs. A Sikh should perform all his duties to his or her best ability depending upon the station of life he is in. The moral duties are right belief, right livelihood and chastity, more or less the same things that are propagated by the Traya Ratna of Jainism. ठीक है, तो वो भी आप यहाँ पे लिंक कर सकते हो. Equality among classes, wealth is also a determinant of social classes besides the caste system. Guru Nanak Dev Ji rejects a distinction based on ownership of economic resources and relation among men of different religions and nationalities. According to Sikhism, one may be a Hindu or a Muslim. All human beings belong to one brotherhood of mankind. So he's talking about the tolerance and all those kind of things. Status of women in the society. Sikh gurus took a firm stand against derogatory practices in regards to the status of women by promoting equality between sexes. और आप इसको conclude कैसे करोगे? आप इसको conclude करोगे उनके relate करके. Guru Nanak Dev Ji stressed on the importance of selfless service to others, which he called seva, and in sharing whatever God has given you with others and helping those who are in need, which is Vachako. He also believed in Kirat, meaning making a living honestly with the virtues, truthfulness and living an ethical life. तो ये कुछ concepts हैं, अगर आप लिख सको तो ठीक है, ना लिख सको तो वो जो ऊपर लिखा है वो भी काफी होगा. The teachings of Guru Nanak Dev Ji shows us the path of establishing a just social order. The social order of his time was based on inequality and injustice. He not only condemned but challenged that order in which the dominant forces of all shades were exploiting the marginalized section. His teachings encourage us to promote virtues and values like tolerance, human dignity and fraternity, and that's why he becomes really relevant in today's context. Okay? So that takes us to the last question of the day in the theoretical portion. सीधा सा question है, 6th B. Explain the term social capital. How does it enhance good governance? What is social capital? Social capital is the benefits we draw out of social interactions and social relationships. And once we understand that what is a social capital, and we can link it to the good governance part. See, social capital अगर होगा तो क्या होगा? Accountability हो सकती है ज़्यादा, पार्टिसिपेशन ज़्यादा होगा सोशल कैपिटल की वजह से. सोशल कैपिटल की वजह से लोगों के डिफरेंट पर्सपेक्टिव्स ऐड होंगे, एम्पावरमेंट होगा सोशल कैपिटल की वजह से. तो गुड गवर्नेंस के लिए जो 8 पार्ट्स है गुड गवर्नेंस में, उसमें एक एंगल है पार्टिसिपेशन और पार्टिसिपेटरी गवर्नमेंट, सिटीजन सेंट्रिक गवर्नमेंट. And if you are talking about that kind of order, you must focus on social capital. What is social capital? So, जैसे economic capital होता है, आपने पैसा जमा करके रखा है, वो आपके पास एक capital. Social capital है the positive forces that you have unleashed in the society that integrate the society and makes the society function as one single unit for achieving common objectives. और social relations जो हैं आपके, उन social relations को आपने इतना strong बना के रखा है that on the basis of those social relations you can leverage it and you can translate it to achieve social objectives and economic growth. That is social capital. Social capital अगर आपके पास होता है तो वो आपको गवर्नेंस में भी मदद करेगा। यही है क्वेश्चन, देख लेते हैं। सो लुक हियर, explain the term social capital. How does it enhance good governance? According to World Bank definition, social capital consists of all institutions, relationships, and norms that develop an influence on the quality and quantity of social interaction. और ये पूरा वर्ड टू वर्ड लिखा हुआ है एआरसी में, अगर आप देखोगे बिल्कुल वर्ड टू वर्ड लिखा हुआ, लाइन उठ के आ गया है एआरसी से। और ये गवर्नमेंट के कई सारे पेपर्स में ये सारी चीजें लिखी हुई, पिक्ड फ्रॉम दोस पेपर्स इटसेल्फ। सोशल कैपिटल थ्योरी कंटेंट्स दैट सोशल रिलेशनशिप्स आर रिसोर्सेज दैट कैन रिलेट टू द डेवलपमेंट एंड accumulation of human capital. For example, a stable family environment can support educational attainment and support the development of highly valued and rewarded skills and credentials. In evolutionary terms, social capital can be defined as any feature of a social relationship that yields productive benefit. Social capital is the advantages that you draw because of your social institutions, relations, and interactions. That is social capital. Social capital and good governance. Social capital nurtures trust between individuals and institutions. This leads to a higher perception of government decisions as valid, resulting in increased compliance with laws and regulations. Social capital promotes social unity by strengthening connections among individuals and communities. In unified societies, people are more inclined to collaborate, which is essential for effective governance. Social capital facilitates transparency and accountability. In societies with substantial social capital, individuals stay well informed about government policies and actions. This transparency empowers citizens to make well informed decisions, voice concerns, and hold government officials accountable for their choices. Social capital enables collective mobilization. Social capital simplifies the process of collective mobilization by providing a platform for people to rally around shared objectives. Grassroots movements, community organizations, and advocacy groups often rely on social networks to rally citizens, advocate for policy changes, and influence government positively. Social capital promotes inclusiveness. Social capital champions inclusiveness by bringing diverse perspectives into the fold. When social networks are robust, marginalized or disadvantaged groups are more apt to be involved in decision-making process. This results in policies and programs that addresses a wider range of needs and issues. Social capital builds resilience. Social capital contributes to community resilience during crisis, such as natural disasters or economic downturn. Social bonds empower communities to pool resources, provide mutual support, and recover more effectively. Best example है कोविड के टाइम का, देख लो अगर आप। सोशल कैपिटल इंप्रूव सिविक पार्टिसिपेशन. सोशल कैपिटल मोटिवेट सिविक पार्टिसिपेशन. इंडिविजुअल्स who belong to active social networks are more prone to engage in democratic processes, including voting, attending public meetings, and participating in discussions regarding governance. Social capital provides policy input. Finally, social capital enables citizens to offer valuable input to the policymakers. Through their social connections, individuals can convey their concerns, suggestions, and needs to government officials, influencing policy decisions and making them more responsive to community demands. And how can you conclude this? You can conclude this by highlighting numerous scholars have suggested that social capital enables citizens to act together more effectively to pursue shared objectives and make collective demands of governance institutions, and that societies with robust associational life and diverse networks are more likely to engage civically and participate in governance than those without such networks. You can integrate scholars here like John Stuart Mill's rule utilitarianism, where if you build social capital, you will derive long-term pleasures out of it. And you can also highlight how Socrates or Plato, they were talking about the importance of a flourishing society and why they are important if you want to build a good nation state. ठीक है, तो सोशल कैपिटल को फाइनली आपको लिंक करना पड़ेगा टू द आइडिया ऑफ अ फ्लरिशिंग सोसाइटी. ठीक है, सो दैट वाज इट वाज एन पेपर जिसमें अगर आप थोड़ा सा आपके पास राइटिंग प्रैक्टिस होगी अगर आपकी, तो आप इसको हैंडल कर लोगे. एंड कॉन्सेप्चुअली इट वाज नॉट सो चैलेंजिंग इफ यू हैव प्रिपेयर्ड वेल. अब एक बात बताओ, जो चीज़ें हमने क्लास में पढ़ी थी कुछ चीज़ें तो एकदम ही डायरेक्ट आ गई हैं और बहुत सारी चीज़ें जहाँ पे हमको थोड़ा सा अप्लाई करना पड़ेगा एंड विल बी एबल टू राइट दैट. अब सोच कर देखो कि जिसने मॉरल थिंकर्स फिलोसोफर्स नहीं पढ़े हैं उसका क्या हाल होगा इस पेपर में, समझ रहे हो? सो दैट्स व्हाई आई टोल्ड यू राइट एट द आउटसेट कि जब पिछली बार मैं क्लास खत्म कर रहा था तो मैंने आपको बोला था, पेपर हुआ भी नहीं था, मैंने आपको बोला था कि जो पेपर आएगा देखना, हो सकता है हम कर लेंगे पूरा अपने नोट्स से ही, और वैसा ही हो रहा है, हम पूरा ही अपने नोट से कर ले रहे हैं, थोड़ी तो ऊपर नीचे चीजें रहती ही हैं, बट द होल आइडिया हियर इज इफ वी कैन फिनिश दिस पेपर in 3 hours time properly with the case studies and जो हमने यहाँ पे डिस्कस किया है क्लास में या आज जो डिस्कस किया है, अगर उसका 80% भी हम लिख कर आ जाएं, we will get more than 140 at any cost, at any given day you will end up with more than 140. अगर इसका 70% भी लिख कर आ जाओ तब भी 110 तक तो आ जाएगा, 110 115 ऐसा आ जाएगा। इसका 50% लिख कर आ जाओ तो भी 90 95 तो मिल जाएगा। लेकिन अगर स्कॉलर्स नहीं होंगे, कुछ नहीं होंगे, लिखते जाओ जितना मर्जी, वो एक ऐड नहीं आता था पेन का कि लिखते जाओ, वैसा ही कुछ, तो लिखते जाओ, चाहे जितना आप लिखते चलो, फाइनली यू विल एंड अप विथ डबल डिजिट मार्क्स, कुछ ऐसा मिलेगा 70 75 73, वो भी पूरा पेपर अटेम्प्ट करने पे। पूरा पेपर अटेम्प्ट नहीं करोगे तो 40 45 50 ऐसे मार्क्स मिलते हैं। So many of my students who have reached out to me after the paper, and I'm glad that they were able to do all the questions. Most of them have handled all the paper properly and they have written. अभी उनसे जो बात हुई है, पता नहीं मुझे कि जो बोलते हैं आके वही अगर लिखा होगा तो they all are in good territory. They all are getting good rewards for that and presentation is the key. थोड़ा presentation पे आपको focus करना पड़ेगा। यहाँ पे देखो थोड़े मैंने कलर्स ऐड किए थे, वो तो आप कर नहीं सकते हो अपनी प्रेजेंटेशन में, बट यू कैन ऑलवेज यूज सम ब्लॉक डायग्राम्स, फ्लो चार्ट्स, वेन डायग्राम्स, स्पाइडर चार्ट्स, टेबल्स, ऐसे करके हमेशा अपने पेपर को मोनोटोनस मत बना देना कि शुरू से ऐसे जहाँ से शुरू हो रहा है वहाँ से एंड तक बस पेपर एकदम मोनोटोनस चल रहा है। इफ दैट वुड बी द केस देन इट विल बिकम वेरी डिफिकल्ट। ठीक है, तो अब देखो ऐसा करेंगे कि मैं दोनों ऑप्शंस खुला रख रहा हूँ। हमारी केस स्टडीज बाकी हैं कुछ, तो हम केस स्टडीज कर लेंगे, उसके बाद केस स्टडी वाला सेक्शन डिस्कस करेंगे, या तो हम ऐसा कर लेंगे या तो हम कल पहले केस स्टडी डिस्कस कर लेंगे। ठीक है, मैं चाहता हूं कि थोड़े हमारे 40 केस स्टडीज हुए हैं, हमारे थोड़े और हो जाएं तो आपको और कंफर्ट फील होगा उन केस स्टडीज पे। ठीक है, सो हम ऐसा करते हैं कि हम पहले केस स्टडीज अपने खत्म कर लेते हैं, 10 और केस स्टडी कर लेते हैं। 10 केस स्टडी करने के बाद 50 केस स्टडी जैसे हमारे हो जाते हैं, नेक्स्ट क्लास में हम एक केस स्टडी डिस्कस कर लेते हैं क्लास का। उसके बाद हम ये क्वेश्चंस लेते हैं। आप ये करो कि ये केस स्टडी के क्वेश्चंस मत देखना तब तक, ठीक है, सीधे क्लास में ही इनको देखना। अगर देख लिए है तो फिर तो ठीक है, अगर नहीं देखा है तो मत देखना इन क्वेश्चंस को, कि क्लास में आओ और फिर कोशिश करेंगे हम इन केस स्टडीज को लिखने की क्लास में। ठीक है, कि हम कहां तक लिख सकते हैं, जैसे लाइक वी डू अवर केस स्टडी सेशंस, वैसे ही हम 6 केस स्टडी होंगे उस दिन के, तो वो 6 केस स्टडी हम लिखने की पूरी कोशिश करेंगे। आई विल गिव यू अ हिंट शीट इफ पॉसिबल। ठीक है, तो आसान है पेपर, चारों जीएस पेपर में अगर आप देखोगे तो अगेन जीएस पेपर 4 स्टैंड्स आउट। जीएस पेपर 4 is the game changer, once again proved in the entire GS section। तो अगर ऐसे अच्छा लिखा है और GS अच्छा लिख लिया है, 4 1 2 3 ठीक लिखा है, मतलब मैं ये नहीं कह रहा हूँ कि बुरा लिखा है, बट ऐसे और 4 अगर बहुत अच्छा लिख लिया है, और अब ऑप्शनल जो होने वाला है अगर ऑप्शनल ठीक ठाक कर लोगे तो नो स्टॉपिंग, नो स्टॉपिंग। इफ यू गेट 140 प्लस इन जीएस पेपर 4 एंड ऐसे में भी अगर ऐसा ही कुछ आता है, ऑप्शनल में भी ठीक ठाक आ जाते हैं मार्क्स, तो सिलेक्शन तो होना ही है, आईएएस भी मिल जाएगा, और हो सकता है कि रैंक सिंगल डिजिट में हो, कुछ भी हो सकता है वो रैंक। ठीक है, और यही है कि आप कितने मेहनत करते हो एथिक्स को लेकर। और एथिक्स एक ऐसा सब्जेक्ट, देखो अभी भी हम पढ़ ही रहे हैं मोस्टली, देयर आर फ्यू 4-5 क्लासेस लेफ्ट केस स्टडी में, वैसे तो हमारा कोर्स हो गया है, बट देखो सोच कर देखो कि अगर अभी विदाउट रिवीजन भी आपका पेपर में कंफर्ट लेवल ठीक ठाक है। ठीक है, अच्छा आप में से ऐसे कितने लोग हैं जिन्होंने चारों जीएस पेपर देखा और उसमें सबसे ज्यादा कंफर्ट आपको जीएस पेपर 4 में लगा? रेज योर हैंड्स, हाउ मेनी पीपल फेल्ट लाइक दैट योर मैक्सिमम कंफर्ट वाज इन जीएस पेपर 4? सो दैट शोज, ठीक है, कि अब बस अगर थोड़ा रिवाइज करोगे तो यू विल फेस नो प्रॉब्लम्स एज फार एज जीएस पेपर 4 इज कंसर्न। ठीक है, सो दैट इज इट फॉर द डे, थैंक यू वेरी मच।